Hey there, my name is Anthony Romano. Thank you for clicking this video because in it I'm going to give you a complete guide to all the sweeteners and fillers that you might be consuming on a ketogenic diet in foods and supplements and overall in other things that you might be exposed to which you want to minimize, okay? Seriously, even if you don't follow a ketogenic diet, this video is a gold mine of all the information you would need on a variety of different fillers in many supplements. And this is also why I have a part 2 to this of just fitness fillers, which includes stuff that is not just solely isolated to keto dieting, so you can watch that one also. But basically, this video is going to give you a broad understanding of all these things because really nobody on YouTube knows about all these things in one perspective. And I'm trying to share that with you. Enjoy. All right. Keto sweeteners, video that's been requested for a long time. Everything in this video, of course, applies to keto dieting, but it also will teach you quite a bit about sweeteners and artificial ingredients and natural ingredients in a variety of products. So send this video to people even if they don't do keto because it will teach them quite a bit. Now, as far as the ketogenic diet context, we know, number one rule, you shouldn't be consuming sugar. Okay, that's the number one sweetener you should avoid in a keto diet is sugar. The reason you're watching this video is because it's presumed you already are looking at foods that don't have sugar, they have sugar substitutes. So, keep in mind, the presupposition here is that you're watching this video because you already know that sugar is not acceptable on a keto diet because spiking your blood sugar is going to end ketosis. And this is a consideration I'll talk about with some of these other sweeteners as well, if some of them do that or not. So, keto context also, watch my video on net carbs in addition to watching this video, because it's not just that fiber will cancel out the carbs. That's a BS, honestly. And I titled the video, Net Carbs Are a Lie. Go watch that after watching this video because the presumption is that you're picking foods that don't already have sugar and there's no amount of fiber that can cancel out the wrong kinds of sugar. So, starting premise, every sweetener that I'm talking about here is presumably in a food that doesn't already contain sugar. So now another premise before this is the sugar reward concern. Okay, so basically with any of these sweeteners, even the cleanest ones, you don't want to overdo any sugar substitute because your brain basically is not designed to eat sweet foods without there actually being a rise in blood sugar. So you can get away with small amounts of this and it won't be a problem. But for people who are really overweight, if they start having lots of these natural sweeteners even, what's going to happen is they might get hungrier over time because the stimulus of sweetness, right, especially some of these sweeteners that are like 400 times sweeter than sugar, without the actual reward of your body getting that blood sugar rise, might make people hungrier in basically their brain's response to, hey, I thought there was sugar here, right? So that's another background premise here. So on to the actual sweeteners. Okay, that's the starting premises. Starting off with the golden child, stevia, okay? This is the number one best sweetener choice you could have in this video, okay? Stevia, any FDA approved version of stevia that you find on the shelves, anything from, Canada or the States, that's any stevia product that's FDA approved is going to be fine. It won't affect your blood sugar. I mean, some of these sweeteners might affect blood sugar in 1% of the population, but it's highly unlikely that it will affect your blood sugar, and it has no adverse health effects. So another thing I'll add in here is that some of these sweeteners, even though they might not affect your blood sugar, the health effect cost of the situation is something to consider. So if I have a day where I'd rather just eat carbs than consume a crap ton of a carcinogenic sweetener, I'll take the sugar if it's real sugar and it's not just, carcinogens, okay? So cancer-causing ingredients. So basically, assuming you want to maintain ketosis, blood sugar is the primary concern, but when we're talking about general health, a lot of these things are more important than, maintaining ketosis, and you'd be better off just having a carb day. So stevia is not a problem at all. It's the best choice. That's the golden child. Now, sucralose. This is often the next best choice, And in general, small amounts of sucralose isn't really a problem, but I am very critical of sucralose. So a lot of people like their Splenda, their sucralose, but sucralose is very chemically similar to a pesticide. And essentially, what it will do is it's chlorinated. So essentially, it will mess with your gut pH and it will kill bacteria, good bacteria in your gut. So this is why people just use the blanket term of sucralose messes with your gut microbiome. But basically, it kills good bacteria and it stays in your gut. A certain percentage, like 30% or so, or 27% of sucralose actually stays in your gut. And we don't know what it does from there. So basically, and I have people in the medical profession who have told me they've done, actual scans and physically looked into people's guts and sucralose is there. So it can mess with your immune system once it's in there. So you don't want to mess with sucralose in general. And this is another reason why I'm very critical of, energy drinks that will use hundreds of milligrams of sucralose, and people are consuming this on a daily basis. It's not a good idea. And even though I like, a sucralose sweetened thing here and there, anything that I consume with sucralose is generally going to be a couple milligrams. Like I have a couple products which, they're mostly stevia sweetened, but they have like 5 milligrams of sucralose, right? Not the biggest concern, but there's more often than not, the things that contain sucralose have much higher quantities of it. So, nothing's really shown big problems in humans yet, but that's because sucralose has only been used for so long and people are only really using it so much nowadays. So in general, sucralose isn't something you want to mess with. If you can find a stevia-based alternative, stick with that and don't go with sucralose. Aspartame. This is the one that everybody knows, the Diet Coke, the soft drinks. Aspartame is an excitatory neurotoxin. Basically, it's made up of 2 amino acids, which are normal. They occur naturally in nature, but the ratios which they're in aspartame basically mess with the body because they're not digested the way that they should be. So essentially what's happening is your brain is being tricked into thinking that the food tastes better than it actually does. That's what an excitatory neurotoxin does. This is the same as MSG, monosodium glutamate. So MSG is common in foods. It's rarely ever found in a keto diet context, except maybe for like beef jerky or something. So aspartame is carcinogenic, and you want to avoid it overall in anything. It's rarely in supplements, but it will be in soft drinks. So for me, the only time I really consume aspartame is if I'm going out to a club or something and I have, a rum and Diet Coke. That's the only aspartame I get. Is it carcinogenic? Yes, but I don't really consume it that often, so I'm not too worried. This is again about practicality and lifestyle. But avoid it if it's a product that you're consuming every day. Get a sparkling water and throw in some stevia-based sweetener instead of getting, so many funky Mountain Dews or Diet Mountain Dews or something like that, okay? And more on the colorings of Mountain Dew soon. So, also touching on MSG because it's another excitatory neurotoxin, monosodium glutamate is often disclosed in foods like chips or something like that. I have a video on it as well. But in a keto context, it won't be used in as high of a quantity. So it'll often be masked by terms like spice extractives or yeast extractives on the back of a nutrition label. Because basically, if it doesn't contain more than 70% MSG, it doesn't have to be listed legally. So oftentimes, the only culprit on a keto diet is beef jerky or something like that. So if you consume beef jerky, even if you're not on a keto diet, you don't want to consume MSG. And you don't want to consume MSG or aspartame because it will make food taste better than it is, and this will prevent you from getting the same amount of satisfaction from other foods that don't contain MSG or aspartame. So basically, it's like exposing a little bit of a drug. Think of it that way in certain ingredients in foods so that you become physiologically dependent on those foods. And other food just simply doesn't do it for you. In fact, my number one tip for most people starting a diet of any kind is to avoid these types of ingredients because the little things really do make the difference. And cutting out something like that will at least help you maintain your appetite and your satisfaction from your appetite. So, next one, sulfame potassium or acesulfame potassium. I call it a sulfame potassium because it's easier and it doesn't sound as silly. ACE-K is the nickname. ACE-K is basically another carcinogen. Well, it contains methylene chloride, I think is the actual carcinogen that's in it. So basically, it is carcinogenic. It does contain a cancer-causing ingredient. And it has actually been shown to cause problems realistically in people. So when we're talking about a carcinogen, even in a small quantity, it's like little bits of poison, right, being put in that you're consuming all the time. ACE-K is very often in supplements. And, you could pull up any supplement. I'm not going to disclose this one in case they, have a problem with it. Just kidding. Basically, I'm not saying I consumed this necessarily. Basically, acesulfame potassium is very present, and it is sweeter than sugar, so it will jack up that reward system. And it is cheap to manufacture, which is like many of these artificial sweeteners. Acesulfame potassium is carcinogenic, and it is very rampant in supplements, so avoid it in supplements. Get supplements that don't contain it, like even, what I got, a BCA here, citric acid, which I'll get to, stevia, that's it, and beta carotene. So basically, that's what I try to pick with my supplements, and you'll never see me advertise or promote a supplement which I don't believe in or wouldn't use myself. Now, there will be times where, I'll have plenty of other items with me, and maybe in a video I'll show another product I had for a certain reason about, maybe another amino acid that interested me in that product particularly, but I will never promote it unless I truly believe in it. I'll disclose if I don't like a product or its sweeteners. So anything you see me promote is because I believe in it. Now, and too many people online just promote the first thing that gets thrown at them because it pays the bills, but it contains trash, and people aren't educated on that until they watch this video. So, aspartame, MSG, excitatory neurotoxins, acesulfame potassium has carcinogenic properties. Saccharin, so this is another one that people know. Saccharin is like sweet and low, okay? And it is supposed to be like the, opposition to Splenda and all that, but saccharin in rats has caused lots of problems in high doses. Now, this is not in humans, but it actually has caused cancer in rats. So even though there haven't been as many human studies, or perhaps there haven't been human studies that have indicated this, anything that can cause cancer in a mammal is generally, even though it's not actually in humans, right? And I am more geared to follow the studies on humans because we're not rats, but it's really been an issue amongst the scientific community that something could cause cancer in rats, in another mammal, but it still isn't, something on a list of, cautionary ingredients. So saccharin, sweet and low, you don't want to go with those. On the topic of sweet and low, which is a common sweetener, and I'm using pictures here so you can kind of, get visuals to each of these things. It's commonly packaged with dextrose, which is a sugar. So dextrose in and of itself isn't necessarily a problem, like for health. It will jack up your blood sugar, and it isn't, acceptable on a keto diet, unless you're doing like a targeted keto, in which case it's actually the best carb for, right before a workout if you're doing that type of carbohydrate day. Now, on to that, maltodextrin. This is a type of sugar that actually is very common with lots of other supplements, with lots of other products, because it's often used, it's basically another filler, but for certain supplements, they'll even throw it in there just so it absorbs quicker because it's very rapidly digesting. Maltodextrin is the highest glycemic, it's the highest sugar on the glycemic index, which means it digests the quickest. So oftentimes they'll throw in, an amino acid with maltodextrin because it absorbs quicker. So watch out for that as well, which is why, example, I'll even throw in, some of my other supplements I have, like if I have a liquid D3, for example, right? So this is fat soluble. Really, there shouldn't be any sugars in there anyways, but sometimes if you get it in capsules or something, it might contain maltodextrin just to keep the consistency of it as a filler. So basically, even though it rightfully has no place in a, fat soluble vitamin, this is an example where if you're getting supplements, get them in liquid form, or at least check if they don't have maltodextrin. Maltodextrin in and of itself, though, can be produced from GMOs, genetically modified ingredients. So basically, maltodextrin can be procured through either wheat, rice, corn, or potatoes. And when we're talking about GMOs, genetically modified ingredients, basically, they're going to be, different than what they naturally occurred as, because all corn is GMO, all soy is GMO, unless it's organic, in which case it's not exposed to pesticides. But all GMOs, like corn in general, will be exposed to pesticides, particularly glyphosate and atrazine, especially for corn. So for corn in general, I try to avoid it as much as possible. Unless you're growing it yourself, in which case it's still genetically modified technically. Like, look up a picture of what corn and like bananas looked like years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago. They're completely different. They're genetically modified now because of the way we've been planting them. So atrazine is an estrogen, and it is in pesticides. Okay, it's often used for corn. Now back to maltodextrin. If that maltodextrin has been sourced from corn or other GMOs, even if it's not necessarily exposed to atrazine, it would be exposed to glyphosate. So glyphosate is another pesticide. Roundup is what it's called in general. But what glyphosate can actually do is, because it contains a glycine molecule, it can become part of the collagen matrix in your body. So basically, it will attach itself to your collagen in your body in high doses. Right now, what does that actually mean? Does it mean your skin will get less of a nice, flattering look to it? Probably. But overall, it's pesticide. It's not meant to be consumed. And anything that would have came from a product which would have been exposed to pesticide is a problem. This is why people have their, soaking their oats type thing. Well, that's more so for the phytic acid and oxalate content, I believe. But basically, besides the anti-nutrient perspective, people will handle certain products, right? Like beans or anything that would be exposed to a pesticide. And we hear about these things all the time, like whether it's with beans or whether it's with soaking other products, because they're trying to rid the pesticide. So this is something that is very common. And anytime you get something from a, mass-produced crop, monocrop, it's very likely exposed to glyphosate. So you don't want to consume that. That's another reason why on keto you're generally going to be avoiding many of these things, because it typically comes to things with large shelf lives, which isn't the, high quality fats, high quality organic vegetables, if you're getting them from good quality sources or growing them yourself perhaps. They're more so in, and also they're not going to be in, animal products unless the animal was fed that, which is why you should be going for grass-fed, pasture-raised, better for the environment, better for your health. But lots of things on keto aren't going to be containing glyphosate unless it comes down to the little details. More so, it will be in breads, it will be in starches, it will be in corn, rice, and wheat, okay, which is already hard for somebody to digest with wheat or gluten. So maltodextrin, a small amount in as a caking agent, basically, or a filler in a quest bar or something, isn't really the biggest deal. If it's a small quantity, especially blood sugar wise, it won't be a big deal. A small bit, like 1 gram, but that's, you don't want to be consuming a bar with multiple. You ideally should be looking for bars that have no maltodextrin. But a microgram of maltodextrin isn't necessarily a problem, but when we're talking about where it was sourced, health-wise, not something you want to consume. However, we're talking about the sweeteners here, so let's go back to those. So maltodextrin shouldn't be in the food altogether, but if it is, unless it says where it was sourced from, which it probably won't, you shouldn't be consuming it. But, if you're going to consume a sugar in this context, dextrose would be better, right? Especially if I was making a supplement and I needed to have it quick absorbing, I would rather use dextrose than maltodextrin. So it's not as quick digesting by a little bit on the glycemic index, but it's less problematic. So sugar alcohols, these are okay in general. Xylitol and erythritol are the most common ones. There is one called maltitol. Maltitol, in some people, has been shown to spike blood sugar. So maltitol is in like grenade bars, like the carb killer bars, which I think are not too bad in general. But maltitol in some people can spike your blood sugar a little bit. Xylitol and erythritol, so anytime it ends in "ol," it's a sugar alcohol. Good little, memory technique there. Anytime it ends in "ol," it's a sugar alcohol, and what sugar alcohols do is they ferment in your gut. So essentially, they won't get digested. The carbohydrate content from them isn't really affecting your blood sugar. So in some people, it might. But overall, if you see the back of a certain bar and you see that it has, a certain carbohydrate content, but there's no maltodextrin, there's no dextrose, it's only from sugar alcohols, it's fine. That is the scenario where net carbs can kind of be okay. But my net carb video was just to show you that you shouldn't use that as your measuring stick for foods that are acceptable on keto. So, xylitol, erythritol, maltitol. Xylitol, erythritol are preferable, but overall, they are going to ferment in your gut. So don't have too high quantities of these things. They will upset your stomach and make you have to go to the bathroom all day long, basically. But Xylitol, erythritol have no health problems at all, and they don't affect your blood sugar. So this is why it's not a bad sweetener choice, but you won't typically see it in like powdered supplements. You'll see it in snacks, which isn't the worst. And for me, I know I'm totally fine with a couple grams of xylitol, erythritol, but some bars will use like 10 grams. Well, 10 grams isn't even necessarily a problem, but 20 grams or something, and this will cause gas and upset for people. So keep in mind your total sugar alcohol content throughout the day if you're somebody who's going towards processed snacks. Like for me, there will never be a scenario where I eat 3 Quest bars in a day, right? If I do have a keto-friendly snack or something like that, you know, maybe I'll have one every few weeks, right? Or even if I, at my most high frequency of consuming processed snacks, it'd be one a day, right? Which I don't really do that often. So, monk fruit. Monk fruit is not a problem. It naturally occurs, and to my knowledge, it isn't produced anywhere. I think it's actually produced in Asia, so it's not, or at least it shouldn't be exposed to, you know, monocropped pesticides. So, not a problem either. Monk fruit isn't bad, and it won't affect your blood sugar. But again, keep in mind, with any of these things, it is the sugar reward system you don't want to mess with in high quantities. So if you're baking or something, even though it's fine on a blood sugar level, you know, don't mess with your natural reward system because it will make you crave things more. Or it could jack up your insulin as a, you know, preemptive response to what it expects sugar to be packaged with, which is delicious sweetness, okay? So, that is the monk fruit. Citric acid, malic acid. Naturally occurring acids in fruits. Citric acid occurs in citrus. Malic acid can be used in the Krebs cycle. And essentially, malic acid actually has some benefits. So does citric acid. It does have some benefits, but malic acid, even example combined with a citrulline, which is an amino acid, can amplify the effects of citrulline. So malic acid, citric acid, although they aren't always used just for sweetening, they'll often be in products like supplements or something, and they have no problems. I'd guess that they might, in some people, might raise blood sugar or gently lift insulin, because again, they're packaged with fruits, which we know are nature's natural sugar source. So in some people, it might affect your blood sugar a little bit, but it isn't going to be a problem in terms of carcinogens or anything unnatural for your body. Again, unless it was produced from a place where there was lots of pesticides, but I don't even know if that's really a problem for citric acid and malic acid. And in general, I'm not too concerned about them whenever I see them in a product. Beta carotene. Beta carotene is a precursor to vitamin A. Now, when we're talking about beta carotene, it could be used for color, it could be used for multiple things, but it will typically be in naturally sweetened things. When you start seeing beta carotene, it's a good sign because it's probably there at the expense of something much worse, like a red dye or, you know, a colorful dye like that. Beta carotene is basically what animals will eat in grass, and it comes out as vitamin A or other fat-soluble vitamins in the flesh of an animal. But for us, it doesn't really do much. I mean, we can convert small amounts of beta carotene to vitamin A, but as far as supplementing with it, you know, just supplement with real vitamin A, retinol. Don't supplement with beta carotene, but again, it's not a problem if you consume it. It's just that it won't do much for you, but it is natural, and it would be a better alternative opposed to artificial coloring. Which brings me to the next section of this, which is artificial colors. These things are terrible. Do not mess with them at all, okay? Red number 40. This is a very common artificial color. It is estrogenic in its nature. So I was talking about atrazine, which is a pesticide, but estrogenic compounds can build up in your body, and essentially they will throw off natural hormone levels, even for women, especially for men too, but for men and women, these will throw off natural levels of, for women, progesterone, estrogen, for men, testosterone and estrogen. The thing that makes men and women different isn't the estrogen, it's actually the testosterone. So the difference between men and women's estrogen content is a matter of picograms, okay? Which is a very, very small unit of measurement in the blood. So essentially, when we're talking about adding estrogen, it doesn't take a lot to cause effects. This is why in yellow number 5 dye, you'll see myths, well, things that haven't been proved in humans, but in rats, where it's reduced sperm count, right? Things that you would naturally associate with estrogens, because that's a topic for another video. And if you want to read a great book on it by Dr. Anthony J. Estrogeneration, a great book on estrogens in foods and other products. But as far as in the food category, yellow number 5, avoid it. It's been shown to decrease sperm count in rats. Now, there have been, or mice maybe, right? One of those. There have been a couple studies that have actually proven this. Does that mean it does that in humans? No, but we know that it's estrogenic in its nature. Same with red number 40. And also, red number 3. Not the movie with Bruce Willis, red 3. I'm talking about another artificial color and dye, which is red 3 and red 40. Basically, avoid any of these artificial dyes. Most of them are estrogenic in their nature, and other ones we don't even know what they fully do in the body over long term, but they're basically lab chemicals, and they really shouldn't be approved by the FDA or any other governing body of food and drink and supplement, but they're terrible. They're in plenty of things. They're in Gatorades or, no sugar Gatorades. They're in plenty of supplements, and you should avoid them like the plague. Seriously. Don't mess with artificial coloring. If you see beta carotene in there, that's a good situation that, hey, there's probably no artificial dyes, but make sure you vet the back of a product. Okay. So those are most of the things, but there is a couple more. So on the topic of estrogenic things, flax. So this is more so in keto products like bars or, baked goods. Flax, or even like bread substitutes. Flax will be there, and flax isn't necessarily a problem in and of itself. Like, of course, it could be produced in a manner which is more exposed to pesticides. It is a seed. But my main beef with flax is that A, it's high in omega-6, which is inflammatory. It's also estrogenic in its nature. So here's the thing. One of the things I also read about was that of all estrogenic things, people tend to think of soy, right? Soy is the highest in its estrogenic compounds. Flax is the second highest in terms of how estrogenic of an effect it has. Now, not all beans are estrogenic. Example, kidney beans have a very small amount of estrogenic effect from studies that we know, which I'm not going to quote because this video is already too long. You can read about that in Estrogeneration as well, which is a great book I read a while back. So flax is the second highest. It's nowhere near the estrogenic effect of soy, but it certainly has a slight estrogenic effect. And because I'm already not a fan of the inflammatory omega-6 fats in there, I'm not really one who likes seeing it in substitutes. Now, example, if I go to Mr. Sub, which I actually saw they have a decent, keto bread substitute, and it contains a bit of flax, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about it. But am I going to consume flax every day? You bet I'm not. Especially because it could be procured in ways which I'm not too, fixated on in a positive way. So, also, people will throw out the argument that flax is a plant alternative to omega-3. It contains ALA, alpha-linolenic acid, and basically ALA can be converted into omega-3s, the real omega-3s, EPA and DHA, but it's not effective. And in general, a very small percent, like less than 10%, actually converts into real omega-3s. So, don't think of flax as a good omega-3 source. And overall, it's something that isn't a preference for fillers in keto stuff, or in any product for that matter. Last thing I'll say is now we're getting to the big problems, okay? So vegetable oils. Vegetable oils, soybean oils, canola oils, any plant oil is going to be closer to a lab chemical than an actual food. This is why, margarine, you can leave margarine outside and even flies won't touch it. Essentially, these are hydrogenated oils. And when you take an oil and expose it to very high heat, not only can it cause other carcinogenic properties, but it is the most inflammatory thing you can consume. Like I said, it's closer to a lab chemical than actual food, because when the fatty acid chain becomes very unstable when it's exposed to very high heat, and that has a great shelf life, and it, makes lots of bucks, and McDonald's can fry things over and over again in this oil, but it is highly inflammatory, very high in omega-6, and it is the number one cause of heart disease. So do not mess with these. Throw these canola oils out. Don't use them, okay? Again, this is about a practical lifestyle. I have a video where one day I stopped in at a Wendy's and grabbed a burger without a bun, right? Just to show the lifestyle practicality of keto. But is this something you should be doing every day? Absolutely not. Because they obviously can cook it in canola oil. But Some places won't. You know, you can go to some other restaurants, get it without a bun, and know that you're not consuming an inflammatory oil. These things are terrible for you, and I honestly watch out for them much more than I watch out for a sulfate, potassium, or saccharin, but also because those things aren't as widespread as canola oil. So in general, don't mess with vegetable oils. Cook with much more stable oils, and if you see them as a filler, if you see these oils as a filler in products, just put it lower in your hierarchy of snacks, okay? Because a mental hierarchy of snacks, because it would be much better if it had like an MCT or a coconut oil, right? Basically the same thing, rather than, you know, a canola oil. They have great shelf life, but they're terrible for you and inflammatory. So, last thing I'll say I have written down here, because I just have a list of just, you know, a bunch of stuff I went through, is corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup is a problem. Basically, any corn syrup, comes from corn, but high fructose is the sugar from fruit, and it does spike your blood sugar and last a while, but the biggest problem for ketosis is that fructose gets digested in your liver. So essentially, it halts ketosis right away because your liver is your backup bench of carbohydrate fuel, and it only really gets filled up if you already have full glycogen stores. So it's going to halt ketosis for a longer time than even pure dextrose. Even though pure dextrose is like going to spike your blood sugar the most, it will halt ketosis for a longer time because it has to go to your liver and then get eventually used up. So it will take longer, despite being a less glycemically dense sugar. So this was the video on keto sweeteners, and you can see why it took me a long time to do it, because it takes a lot of energy to film for 30 minutes straight, but that's what I like to advocate. I like to advocate, of course, the low carb methods, the ketogenic diet, and it doesn't mean that you have to do it all year long. It's simply something that can dramatically improve your performance in a variety of ways. Your brain prefers to run on fat, and if you want to learn more about that, watch my other videos. Subscribe to me right now and go to my website, romanoketo.com, for keto coaching, and keto plans are going to be up there very soon, I promise you. Planning on writing out some other documents, some free, some purchasable, just the best literature on keto out there, because so many people get it wrong, and really, I want to be the best source on the internet about this. So help me do that. Share this video, comment, like, and all that good stuff. Hopefully I gave you some clarity, and you have a good sense of what to consume and not to consume on a keto diet, as far as sweeteners, as far as snacks, right, baking, and other supplements. That's it. Thank you again for watching. My name is Anthony Romano. Peace.